Welcome to the Open Hope Show. I'm your host, Dr. Gloria Horsley, with my daughter,
Dr. Heidi Horsley. Hi, Mom.
So much fun. I love your Christmas tree behind you.
Thank you.
Into the holiday season. Well, we know a lot of you are, have trepidation about the holiday season, and grief can upend your holiday. And we want to talk to you about that and give you some tips and thoughts and ideas today. Well, I'm sure you know about Wonderful Compassionate Friends because there are 600 chapters in the United States, and Debbie's the fabulous executive director. Heidi's on the board. And I hope a lot of you went to the candle lighting last night. We did light a candle at exactly 7 o'clock at our house.
Nice.
And had our own little memory. And you know what we did this year, which was kind of sweet? My husband and I were there alone, and we both told a couple of memories of Scott.
That's kind of what we did too. You know, it doesn't have to be something fancy or anything. And in fact, this year, for the very first time, Compassionate Friends did a virtual candle lighting. So even if you didn't have a chance to participate in the worldwide candle lighting, you can still go on the website and watch the virtual candle lighting. It's kind of nice just to give that pause in the holiday time.
Yes, especially, and we'll get to it if you're going out for other events, because there are a lot of issues related to that. Well, let's talk about some of the things you could do about the holiday. I wondered, Debbie, how long has it been for you? And there's your sweet son.
Yes, that's my Tony. Tony drowned in March of 2011. So for me, it's really not been all that long that I've been on this journey. So, you know, I love helping others, and I found that it's really healing to help others as well. So, you know, people say I help them, but really they help me just as much or more.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And it's been 7 years, is that right? Did you say?
Yes, that's correct. Yeah.
And there I am. I can tell it's been a few years for me. And that's Scott. He loved Christmas. That's another thing, you know, how your family felt about Christmas before the holidays. Scott was a great lover, and there he is opening, and he loved cookies, and you can see we got a good plate.
I just love the fact that Tony and Scott are both with their Christmas presents.
Yes.
It is bittersweet because they're there and such great memories. And yet they're not physically here. So it makes holidays hard, I think.
It does.
Yeah, they are. We're going to give you some tips and ideas right now. So let's start with the first one. Scale back your expectations. Debbie, you want to take that on?
Sure. You know, it's a common question that we get in Compassionate Friends. What do I do? You know, my mother-in-law always has Christmas dinner, and, you know, it's an expectation that our whole family come, but I just don't feel like being around other people. So, you know, there's all kinds of situations like this. And there's, you know, a number of strategies that you can use, but, you know, you've got to cut down for what you feel comfortable with. And remember, this is your grief journey. So, you know, don't let people put those expectations on you. And you can always say, I will try, but I can't promise. So give yourself an out before you ever, you know, commit to anything. I will try, but I may not feel like it right at that moment.
Well, you can scale back your expectations. I agree with that. And I like the idea of I will try, but I can't promise anything. But unfortunately, parents that have surviving children at home oftentimes need to put on their game face, and they need to you know, step up and do the whole holiday thing, because kids really, really want it, especially after a loss. They even want it more because things have been so sad. And, you know, oftentimes if kids will say to me, you know, I feel like sometimes I'm not enough because my parents are so sad that I'm not enough for them. So
Yes.
It's hard though, because sometimes you got to fake it.
Yep. Well, I was just thinking, you know, that big plate of cookies we saw there by Scott, buy them. I mean, some of those things that maybe you felt like you had traditionally, you have to do, buy it.
Yes.
Buy already cooked turkey. You know, buy some of those things, or ask people to bring them in. I think also take a break. You know, just 15 minutes of going up into your room and closing the door and laying on the bed can really be rejuvenating. So try to take some of
Yeah.
the little breaks for yourself during the holidays.
And I think sometimes you need that because sometimes you become so overwhelmed with grief that you kind of need to step back because certain things trigger us during the holidays, certain memories.
Hmm. Well, let's
Yes, and it's important, I think, to have kind of a buddy wherever you're at. Someone, it doesn't necessarily have to be the host or the hostess, but just someone that you let them know, hey, if you don't see me, it's okay. I just needed to step away so that, everybody's concerned about you and they're wondering, oh, where'd Debbie go? Is she okay? And that buddy system, you've got somebody that can say, no, she's fine. I know she just needed a few minutes to step away. So allow yourself to do that. But at the same time, you've got to let people know that, you're going to be okay. So buddy up with someone so
and
that they can.
brings me into another point about that. Buddy your kids up. If you have
Yes.
little kids, have a friend, but ask one. Maybe your child loves your nephew. Ask your nephew. Boys love that kind of thing. If they take your child out to either play, do ice skating, and shoot some hoops, or maybe to buy a present. Mary says, my husband died 2 years ago. I wanted to do a full-blown Christmas and change traditions. I'm getting a lot of flack from my in-laws. They want me to stick with the same pattern. Wow. With the in-laws. And they want her to stick with the same pattern, but Mary wants to do a full-blown Christmas. Debbie, have you got any thoughts? It's been a couple of years since Dad died, her husband.
Yeah, I do. And again, it really goes back to our last slide about expectations. Obviously, the in-laws have expectations, and communication is very important. So you do what you need to do to get through this grief journey. And if you want to have a full-blown Christmas, then you just have to communicate that. And you have to say, I understand you'd like to keep things the same, but I really need to do this, so I'm going to go forward. And then that way, by laying out that framework, then they know what to expect. So I think you have to do what feels right to you.
Well, and sometimes your new holiday tradition may be honoring the person that died. I like the idea of honoring your child or your sibling or your grandchild or your spouse or whoever has died, but the idea of there's a wreath right here. So some people will get a wreath and then they'll put all the things that, like I would put all the things that Scott loved. He loved the New York Jets. He loved Twix bars. He loved, cinnamon gum. And you go out and buy them and then you decorate the wreath with them. So that's one suggestion, but just ways, toasting them, things that you can do to bring them in the room and honor their memory, I think are really important.
Well, and if you do something in their name that you can leave around, like the candle with their name on it or what, they're kind of there and part of the tradition, and you don't have to, they're just a presence. So way to make them a present. Do you have any thoughts on that, Debbie?
Yeah, a lot of people they find, again, helping others is healing. So in order to honor their child or, whether it be a husband or a grandchild or a brother or sister, they may go to like on Christmas Day and serve a dinner at the Salvation Army in honor of their child. So you don't have to keep the same traditions, and you can do the things that it just makes you feel good. The holidays, when we were young, the biggest part was the surprise of getting a present. I mean, when you're small, it's like, that's the fun. But really, as we grow a bit older and mature, really the fun is in giving. So I think it's a way just to find a way to give in honor of your child. Maybe it's taking, if you've lost a young child, take some toys that they would have liked. Go ahead and shop for them and take them to a homeless shelter. So it doesn't have to be anything elaborate. As you said, just lighting a candle. We always do that. So Tony's, we know his light is always shining right there with us.
I love that.
Well, let's talk about focusing on your favorite things, because I think it's important to decide. Maybe you can even make a little list for yourself this year. It doesn't have to be long. what is the favorite part of Christmas for you that it would be important for you and sad if you didn't do it? And then you can cut out some of the things that aren't as favorable that you don't like.
Well, for me, I think it's kind of like when you think in terms of Thanksgiving dinner, going around and asking all of those that are going to be maybe in your inner circle and saying, what is your favorite part? So that, you have an idea of, oh, they always like the toast that we give, or someone else that just might be, I like where we light the candle together. So I think it's, again, communicating with each other, everyone that's going to take part in your celebration, whatever that celebration might be, so that you're as inclusive as possible and trying to touch base on all of the things that are important to each other and maybe not doing everything.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. We have a big Christmas Eve dinner usually. And Heidi, if she's around, has the idea of a toast. Heidi, talk about the toast a little bit.
Well, from a sibling perspective, I always like to speak for the siblings, and we often feel forgotten, unacknowledged, and minimized in our loss, and just kind of invisible. So I always say, when you give a toast to people that have died, like when you give a toast to Scott, include your living children as well as the children that have died.
Yes.
So in other words, say things like, okay, this toast is, this is for Scott. Got my little water. This toast is for Scott and to remember him. And it's also for Heather, Rebecca, and Heidi. And I'm so glad that they're here with us. Mm-hmm. So bring in all your children, not just those that are no longer here.
Yeah, when we celebrated our toast at Thanksgiving this year, we toasted Heidi's son, Alexander, who's in Afghanistan. So, and he'll be there at Christmas too, so we'll have to figure out some little rituals that we can do to remember him. Laura says, my son passed away by suicide last December. Is it okay to skip the holiday family events altogether?
And, I'll start out with that because your grief journey is your journey. Mm-hmm. And I'll tell you what my husband and I did. Initially, we tried to go around the grief. And so we didn't do a celebration hardly at all at the holidays. And we went somewhere. But what we found was when we came back, that darn grief was still there. We hadn't really escaped anything. And in fact, it went with us. But you really have to kind of do what feels right. And there really isn't, you should do this or you should do that. You have to do what's right for you and let everyone know what you're going to do that's right for you.
Mm-hmm. Our first Christmas, I happened to have been a therapist at the time. And one of the therapeutic things that they always said was, you should do the same ritual. You should go through the same thing that first year because you're going to have to unpack the boxes later. Go through and do Christmas. So I don't know if Heidi probably didn't even know that that's why we did Christmas. In fact, I just tried to do it exactly the same way. And I'm sure I cut back on things. You're in a fog. And
yeah.
But we went through that, and we actually did that for 2 years. And then on the third year, we left and went to Hawaii and didn't do anything. But that's just our pattern of what we did. Everybody needs to do it their own way. But as Debbie said, and I'm saying, it is tough to open those boxes and things. Heidi, have you got any thought on that?
I loved going to Hawaii. It was such a relief to get away. And I think one of the hardest things is unpacking the Christmas bulbs for those that celebrate Christmas, because some of them have my brother's name on them and they were his Christmas bulbs and he used to hang them. And it was really, really painful to unpack those boxes and have him not there helping us.
Yep. So we had support people. We had some people that did a Secret Santa for us. You'll find some people that you didn't know will come in and support you. But anyway, on the suicide thing, you are just going to have to do what you want to do. And I hope you're going to Compassionate Friends or a support group or a therapist. if you haven't done that, you might want to consider getting that kind of support, or maybe you have a pastor or somebody. Because, and I'm glad you mentioned it to us. My heart goes out to you that about the suicide and it being Christmas.
Absolutely. And you know, Mom, you said people will be there for you. If they're not, ask them to be there.
Yeah.
Because sometimes people don't know what kind of grief support we need. We expect them to be psychic. So bring more people in. Debbie's nodding, so I know she's resonating with this, right? Right?
Yes, absolutely. You know, people, they really don't know how to help us. And sometimes, you know, they say some things that you think, why in the world would they have said that?
Yeah.
And what I really try hard to do is listen to their intent and know that they're really trying to help me. And there's also online resources. You know, when Gloria was talking about, you know, going to a therapist, going to a group, going to compassionate friends, do all of the above till you find what fits and resonates with you. But there's online resources as well. So if you don't feel like getting out of your pajamas, stay in them and, you know, go online and find others that are waiting to reach their hand back to you to help you along this journey.
Absolutely. And we're not saying it's not a tough year.
Oh, gosh.
The first Christmas is really tough. And you do have to remember it's just one day and all those things that feel like cliches or whatever, but you know, you just have to get through it. It's rough. So yeah, we appreciate that. So do some things on your own. Let me say one thing about this. I always say, if you do things with everybody all the time, do some things on your own. If you're a loner and never do anything with anybody, this is a pretty hard, grief and loss is a hard burden to carry on your own.
I think that you do need downtime. So I guess that would be what I would consider doing things on my own. You do need time to kind of, you know, regroup and to yourself and not to have to be on. Because sometimes you feel like, okay, I have to be on, I have to put on my game face and I don't feel like it. I'm a mess. So I think it's good to kind of step back and get some time by yourself.
Yeah, and you know, grief is really hard work. A lot of people don't think of it as work, but it is hard work. And so you have to kind of work through it. You have to do some of those things on your own to build that self-confidence again. Because what happened with me was my confidence, I just lost it because my world, as your world, shattered. And I was like, I had to figure things out again. So to me, doing some things on your own is pushing myself just a little bit. I don't have to push a lot, but to gain that self-confidence again in my world that I do have some control over things.
Mm-hmm.
I like that, Debbie, because it's so strange being the bereaved family. You know, you always think it's going to be you always see other people in that situation. And all of a sudden it's you and you're like, wow, now I'm that person.
Mm-hmm. So we've got another question from Polly. She says, when sending Christmas cards to someone that has lost a child, is it okay to mention their loss and what's appropriate? Any suggestions?
Yes.
Maybe you're a good writer. What do you do?
Oh, definitely. Please mention their loss. Let them know, you know, what happens sometimes is people like to, I'm not going to bring it up because it will upset them. We're going to be upset anyway. We get more upset if we don't hear their name as if they're forgotten. So, oh my goodness, I am so glad you asked that because I think it's important to acknowledge that we know this is going to be a tough time for you, and I'm really sorry. I don't know what it's like. Don't say I know what it's like. Everyone's grief is different, but I'm there for you. And then be kind of proactive. You know, I'd like to come and take you to coffee. Are you available on the weekend? You know, instead of just saying, if there's anything you need, just let me know.
Yeah, right. I remember a doctor of ours went to the line at the viewing and he said, call me in a couple of months when you're feeling better. And I'm like, I'm going to call you. I don't think I'm going to call you. You know, you know, you have to call some people, and sometimes you have to call them pretty regularly before, you know, before they kind of feel comfortable. I love texting. I've been texting my friend whose son died a few months ago. And you can say, texting is great because you can say, hi, thinking of you.
Yes.
Yes, I agree.
And, initially for me, it was, Tony died on a Wednesday. So it was every Wednesday. It's another Wednesday. Eventually that went away. But then it was always the second of every month. It's like it's the second again. And so, there are those things that we just keep kind of playing over in our minds. So yes, please mention their name. And if you have a favorite story or a memory, share that as well.
I love that. That's a great gift to give to somebody, sharing a story or memory.
It really is.
Mm-hmm.
That is a wonderful idea to share a memory. I know a lot of people have been doing that on Facebook for Scott after all these years. So, and the holidays bring up a time. And you could ask people if you want to know, say, it's the holiday time coming around. Do you have any memories of mom or dad or my son or whoever that I could share with our family this year?
Mm-hmm.
And it doesn't matter how long it's been. Really putting them together. And breathing. I'm going to start with breathing because actually my friend's son who just died, the first thing I talked to her on the phone, and the first thing I said to her in text, I didn't say it on the phone. I said, please take 5 breaths for me today. 5 deep breaths. Because people don't realize that when you have had a loss, you breathe in the upper chest, and that's the fight or flight sympathetic. You don't get down into the gut, which is the parasympathetic, which they call repose and repair, which is how you relax after you eat. So it's important to remember breathing. Heidi, why don't you take gratitude?
Well, the research shows that gratitude is the #1 quickest way to change how we feel. But it's really hard, I think, after a loss, because you ask people about gratitude and they kind of get irritated. It's like there's nothing to be grateful for. Tony's dead, Scott's dead. What is there to be grateful for? So sometimes you have to kind of get further away. But even little things in life. I mean, I'm grateful for the fact that Scott was in my life for 17 and a half years. Initially, you might just be grateful that your lights work. It might have to be little things, grateful for some of the people that are still in your life. And as you focus on the gratitude, it'll start to grow and you'll start to see more and more things in your life that you're grateful for.
Right. And the breathing and the gratitude, they change brain chemistry.
When you're later on in this journey, you won't see it right away, but there really are some gifts in grief. And as Heidi said, she had Scott for 17 and a half years. I had Tony for 29. But there are other types of gifts of grief. Like I got to meet these 2 wonderful ladies that are so strong. And, otherwise I'd have never met them. Now, don't get me wrong. I would take Tony back in a second and forget them forever. But, kind of try to think, okay, what are the gifts? But don't push yourself to do that because it takes time to get there. Mm-hmm. And then sleep for me, sleep was off and on. Sometimes that's all I wanted to do. I just wanted to stay in bed. I didn't want to move and I would just sleep off and on. And then sometimes I couldn't shut my mind down. And so I had trouble trying to sleep. So what I would do is I tried to find activities. And I, for example, am not a jigsaw puzzle person. But what I found was I could rest my mind by trying to put together the pieces of a puzzle where instead of my mind racing, which was keeping me from sleeping, I could rest my mind. And by doing something like that right before bed, it was easier for me to rest and to get some sleep.
Debbie, I love that idea of doing a puzzle. Mm-hmm. That's a really great idea.
Staying off of the electronics at night.
Yes. Yes.
Don't take your iPad to bed.
Well, and I think electronics are also difficult because after you've had a loss, you go onto Facebook and Instagram and see everybody's families. And see all these people that have never had a loss. And it's hard. And I used to get jealous of people that still had a brother. I was like, wait a minute, my brother loved his life and I loved being with them. And why did this happen to me? So.
Or how about those Christmas letters that you got? It's like, la, 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 la. Their life is perfect and mine is not.
Exactly. Yeah, it's really hard.
It's hard. It's hard.
It's hard not to compare.
It is. It is.
Well, and as our friend Jed Black said about sleep, if you go on our site to and Google Jed Black's radio show, he was an expert at Stanford on sleep. And one of the things he says is don't have a glass of wine before you go to bed. You might think it's relaxing, but you'll wake up at 1 o'clock in the morning, which is an interesting thought. But he also said that you wake up 7 times a night, adults do. And
Wow.
so just know that you're going to. So now when I wake up, I'm kind of like going back to sleep, right, Heidi?
Yeah, I just realized that you can still be well rested and wake up, I think, 7 to 10 times a night. That's what adults do normally.
Yeah.
And so it does take the edge off of things. When you wake up, you say, okay, this is number one, and this is okay. I'll still be well rested, instead of getting yourself in a frenzy when you wake up.
We're down to number 7 is exercise. But if you don't do some exercise, you're obviously going to have trouble sleeping.
You really have to find, in my opinion, that person that really kind of gets it. I have a husband of 43 years. I've never, been without him. So I can't really help someone that's lost a spouse. I can certainly sympathize with them. But having lost a child, I can really talk to someone and say, oh, I get it. Yes, I thought I was going crazy. No, I did that too. So it's trying to make those social connections, not only with the people that get it, but also with the people that don't, to say, it's been really tough. And thanks for asking about Tony. Just kind of letting people know, don't become a recluse if at all possible, because you've got to get out there and do, stretch a bit and make yourself move forward through the grief.
Well, and I think if you don't connect and if you get isolated, you start to think that what you're going through is not normal.
Yes.
And there's something wrong with you and that you're going crazy and that you're not doing it right. And there's not a right and wrong way to do it. And I think the more you can get around people that have had a shared experience, the more you're like, okay, you know what? This is the way it looks. I'm fine. It's going to be okay eventually.
And it's strange how sometimes things happen that people appear and say something that is life-changing to you. It's odd. I had someone get in touch with me who was in our Compassionate Friends group, and it was her 2-year anniversary, and she is a school teacher and very competent. She got in touch with me on the phone and said, Gloria, I think I'm going crazy. And so we met, and I said, that's not unusual during the 2nd year. It sounds like you're getting worse, but you're getting better because you're thawing out and you're realizing that this is life and you can take in more. So talking to me, I've been there, I could say that.
And if, it's not something I've experienced, because there's such a vast network in Compassionate Friends for the loss of a child, a grandchild, a brother or a sister. I may not know someone personally, but I can put you in touch with someone that has a very similar situation that you can talk to and, just, run by them. Am I doing okay? Am I doing the right thing? Just to talk it out. We've got like 26 closed Facebook pages now. So we have things like for men only. So the only people on that closed page are men, where they can feel like they can really express themselves. We have one just for siblings, one just for grandparents. We've got them for the type of loss, for the age of your child, grandchild, brother, or sister. So lots of resources there.
I think the great thing about exercise is that you don't have to do a lot of it to get benefits. So if you walk, I think it's 3 or 4 times a week, 20 to 30 minutes, that can profoundly change your life. And grief gets trapped in our bodies. It's very traumatic to have a family member die. So it gets trapped in our bodies, and we need to move our bodies to move through that, to get the grief out. And so just walking is very beneficial.
Mm-hmm. I just think we forget that grief is not just a mental experience. It impacts your whole body, your whole system, your cardiovascular. all those kinds of things.
Gloria, that's exactly what I was going to say, is that, we think grief is all in our heads, and it encompasses our entire bodies. And that's why sometimes people will get ill more easily afterwards. And, getting up and moving, it refreshes your mind, and it works things out through your system. So even if you don't have to do a lot, you don't have to run a marathon, but just get up and walk a little bit.
Yeah. And I always say, if people are into restorative yoga, it is really incredible. And you will feel like you're not doing anything. You will sit there and lay down on blankets. I mean, that's all you, and they move you in different places, and you have pillows and blankets under you, and you will feel very different afterwards, because it's moving the grief in your body.
We have some wonderful television shows that you can go on Open to Hope and access with Bessel van der Kolk. He wrote a book called The Body Keeps Score, and we did 3 shows with him. And he talked on there about how yoga, actually they've done a study that shows that it's more effective than antidepressants.
When we do workshops, we always give people quizzes about how often they think on average babies laugh a day. And on average, babies laugh 350 times a day.
Wow.
I know, right? In contrast, adults laugh about 20 to 25 times a day. So laughter is an emotion, and it's similar to crying. I mean, it's a way to get emotion out. It's a very positive way. I would encourage people to do it. I think what gets in the way is we feel guilty when we laugh. We feel like, oh, Heidi didn't love her brother, she wouldn't be laughing. So we feel disloyal, but laughing is a way to grieve.
I found that right after Scott died, maybe for 10 days when there were people around, we kind of had this dark humor. We actually laughed a fair amount and weird things.
Yeah, that's why it's good to get around people that are going through the shared experience, because otherwise people are like, "What? That's not funny." It's not funny that you couldn't close his casket because you put so many of his things in there. I mean, people that have not been through the experience don't understand. It's a way for you to cope. It's a way for you to get out the emotion.
I know one of our chapter members was saying that she kept her dad's ashes in her van under the seat. And she was talking to her friend about, oh, my dad's in the van. And they were kind of laughing about it. Well, somebody there from the police department or whatever heard them, or somebody who knew police, and they called her at her home and said, we understand that your father's living in the van. It's against ordinance.
Oh, that's funny. Well, we're in the middle of a move, and I'll just share a brief funny story. So the Packers are there, and, they work very quickly when they go through your house. It's like you can't keep up. And I had forgotten, Tony was cremated, and I keep him in my office with me on a shelf. He's always there. And I had forgotten, oh my gosh, I've got to go get Tony. And so I ran in there afraid that they'd packed him, and they hadn't. And I was like, oh, thank goodness. I said, will you hand me my son? And the guy said, I said, I'm sorry. I said, my son's remains are on that second shelf. I can't quite reach them. And so then what's funnier is then we put him on the kitchen counter, and then the Packer working the kitchen, my husband's in there, keeping an eye on things. And he says, and do you want this box packed? And my husband says, no, that's my son. And then the Packer says, oh, I'll take very good care of him. My husband says, no, he's riding in the car with us. So,
oh my gosh, I love it. And people that have been through this get it. They get that. Yeah. They understand the importance of that, and that's your, calling him your son, and how important the urn is and all that. I mean, we get it.
Yes.
We know that laughter not only causes you to breathe, because think about it, when you laugh, you have to breathe in deeply, but we also know that it promotes more dopamine in the brain. Mm-hmm. So, and how do you talk about smile and your brain will think you're happy, right?
Yes, it's actually been shown with the research. If we smile, and a lot of times if you put a pen in your mouth and smile for 60 seconds, it makes you smile bigger than you would without it. Okay? And for all of you watching, you can smile really big. Even if you don't feel like smiling, and even if you're not happy, it will tell your brain, I am happy right now. I am happy, because these are muscles that are going up. So it's interesting. In fact, they've also shown that Botox helps people with depression because all of a sudden you have a permanent smile on your face.
Another reason. Okay.
And another thing Bessel van der Kolk told us when he was on our show is that he himself, son, was very depressed. And he started doing improv. And it changed his whole life.
Art Sumner, Healing Improv, does a wonderful job of, you get in a group and you think, what's this going to be? And you were laughing by the end of the session. It's wonderful.
I love it.
And then there's yoga laughter. There are all sorts of things to think about from that. Well, let's talk about focusing on the positive.
I think initially it's difficult, but I think we have to force ourselves to go into those places or we're going to get really, really low and have a hard time coming out. So I always say to people, think about all the negativity you're giving yourself. We feed ourselves a lot of negative stuff and try to balance it a little bit. Try to force yourself to think about some positive things in your life, even though it could be difficult, so that you can create, the more that we do that, like again, the more that we feel better. We feel better when we do that. It's hard to do.
Yeah, one of the things that I find hard in grief and loss, Debbie, and I'd love you to comment on this, is for people who are together. I'll say my husband and I, because I have a husband. And after our son died, there would be days when I would get up and say, "Okay, I'm going to really get it going today. Okay, I'm going to focus on the positive, and I'm going to really get it going." And I see him, and he says, "I've had it today. I'm exhausted. I can't go through this anymore. I can't stand going to work." I frankly kind of resented it sometime. And I'm sure he resented me when he was trying to pull it together too. What's your thought, Debbie?
Yeah, it is when you've got a partner, it's difficult. You're lucky if when they're down, you're up. It's really bad when you're both down, but it is difficult when, you see the other one perhaps going on with normal, regular, what appears to be, fine routines, and you're not able to even get dressed. So it's kind of like, how can you do this? I can't do that. So, and I think the important part of that is you can't compare yourself to anyone. Whether it's been your life partner for 40, 50 years, you're still going to grieve differently and uniquely from each other.
Mm-hmm. Heidi, how about being in college or at school and people expecting you to be positive after?
Well, yeah, I think that's really, really hard. I mean, I was in college when Scott died and I was 20. And I think that there's an expectation by other 20-year-olds. First of all, most 20-year-olds have never lost a brother or sister. They don't even understand what that is. And there's very little tolerance for you not being fun. So you get about 2 weeks to grieve, and then they want you to be over it and move forward and act like a 20-year-old, act like a fun 20-year-old. So that's very, very difficult, especially if they didn't know the person that died. If you're in a space like I was where nobody knew Scott, it was really hard for me because there wasn't a lot of support from my friends.
Yeah. So during this holiday season, people are doing more parties and more happy and more this and more that. Sometimes it may be difficult, and self-care is really important. Well, let's talk about hugs. Hugs, love them.
Yes.
20 seconds a day is what you should be getting as far as hugs. And the best part about it is you don't need to hug somebody else to get the benefits. You can hug yourself.
Just like babies, fold their arms and rock.
So you can do it right now, everybody.
But maybe as part of your Christmas gift from somebody you love, maybe even one of your kids or somebody, ask them for so many hugs, or give that as a gift to a bereaved person in your family.
Yes, I think the touch is very important. My husband and I, our goal is 8 hugs a day. And that probably comes out. And sometimes we're like, hey, it's 6:00. We've only had 3 hugs. And it's like, okay, here's another. Okay, here's another one. But it does help. It really does to hug each other.
And your husband's a big bear of a hugger, I bet.
He is. He gives great hugs. And he loves to give hugs.
And Debbie, have you ever noticed that oftentimes when we hug, we smile?
Yes, absolutely.
It's like
absolutely.
I'm just thinking about it.
Yeah. All of a sudden you find yourself smiling. It's like, oh, I'm smiling too.
Yeah. Yeah.
I have a question from somebody, Mom.
Oh, okay.
It's from, emailed it. It's from Shauna. And she said her mother died February of last year and her father died 4 years ago. So she's lost both of her parents.
Wow.
She said, I have children who I'm trying to hold it together for. Her husband is a great support, but he's never had the death of a parent. She said both of her parents really love Christmas, and she wants to know any suggestions to help her get through the holidays without her parents.
Well, first of all, I want to say that our website, the #1 visit we have, and we have millions of people visiting our site, is parent loss, adults losing parents. I think parent loss is a very unrecognized loss for people. Even a 90-year-old parent, it's a huge loss. So,
well, Mom, we've never known our world without our parents in them.
mm-hmm.
So it's huge when your parents.
And it's a marginalized loss too,
Yeah.
because oftentimes people will say to you, "Oh, they had such a full life. They lived so many years." You know, that's like saying, "Oh, you shouldn't be sad." And it's like, no, that you can't marginalize it like that.
I agree, Debbie.
You need to figure out how to take those breaks for yourself while still doing whatever these good things are. I would say you need to pick out the things that are most important for you personally to have in Christmas. If there are other things that aren't as important, you can ask your kids. I don't know how old they are. If it's important to them, they can do it. You can ask a relative, maybe a family gathering of what's important at Christmas.
I think if things are too painful, you can just stop doing them.
Yeah. And I think it's important to talk to the children as well. Like when we were lighting our candles last night for Tony, I was explaining to my grandchildren that are 8, 9, 10, and 12 that, grandma's sad and I have tears, but it doesn't mean that I'm not okay. I'm okay. I just, I miss your Uncle Tony. And then I equated it, to carrying a backpack, and how sometimes I don't feel it. Other times it's like I don't know if I can walk anymore. And that it's okay. It's okay for grandma to cry, and it's okay for me to miss him because I loved him so much. So I think opening up to your children depend, of course, on their ages, but letting them know that just because you're sad doesn't mean that you're not okay or that you're not going to be okay.
I think that that's really important for kids to hear, because at the end of the day, they're terrified that their parents are not going to be able to take care of them, and that they're not going to be okay long term. So I love that, just to reassure them.
Well, Debbie and Heidi, it's been a great show today, and I hope we've given a lot of good advice for those folks out there.
May you have a healing holiday season. We will never forget our loved ones, as they will always be in our hearts. The holidays are a time that our memories will continue to connect us with those who have made us who we are today.
Thank you. And Debbie, have a wonderful holiday.
You too, both of you. Thank you, everyone, for watching and for being there for each other.
Absolutely. Heidi, did you want to say something?
Yes, I just want to thank everybody, and please don't be too hard on yourself. Yes. Don't judge your grief. Just be there with it, and know that you're not alone.
And Laura sends us our final note, which is very touching, Laura. She says, "Thank you so much, ladies. I am so glad you found us."
Oh,
I love that.
And thanks, everyone, and have a safe and a comfortable holiday. And please take care of yourself, as you're the most important person, because people are looking to you to see how they should behave, and seeing that you can deal with it, can talk about it, can cry, can do whatever you need to do, is, I think, an inspiration for everyone. And Debbie and Heidi and I want to remind you always that if you've lost hope this holiday season, please lean on ours until you find your own, and God bless.